Good afternoon. Welcome to the 6th annual Department of Medicine Shark Tank Finalist competition, where just like the game show, you're going to meet a number of sharks on this session, and we're going to meet a number of individuals pitching their ideas to us. Our sharks today are on the hunt for the best high-value, high-impact care project. And just like the show, we will take a stake in these projects, but not a financial stake. We'll be taking an intellectual stake in the projects you'll hear about today. And the stakes are high. For the winner, you get bragging rights to say you were the Shark Tank competition. You will get personalized coaching from experts in the field, assistance with your project and project management, prioritization for data analytics. You will get visibility through various platforms in the department and beyond, and you will get the coveted Shark Tank trophy. Most importantly, perhaps as the chair of the department, I will say what I am most passionate about our session today is you will get the opportunity to really impact and improve patient care and change outcomes. So I'm excited to hear about these projects. I hope you are too. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Michael Ho, who will lead us through our session today. Michael?
Great. Thank you, Dr. Chopra. So as Dr. Chopra said, welcome to our 6th annual Shark Tank competition. Here's the agenda for today. First, I'll introduce the sharks. Then we'll hear and see the finalist presentations. And then we'll have a People's Choice Award. And then Lorna Allen will update us as the winner of last year's Shark Tank competition on current status of her project. And then finally, we'll announce the winner of this year's Shark Tank competition. So the presenters have no disclosures. So again, just a reminder, really the mission of this program is to support QI projects that are aimed at improving high value care, with that being defined as projects that improve quality, patient safety, or patient experience, and or simultaneously reduce cost and or maintain similar costs. So again, the finalists will have 3 minutes to pitch their project to our judges. Then we'll have a live Q&A with our between the projects and our sharks. Again, then the audience will pick your favorite project, and that will help in the judges' deliberations. And then finally, we'll pick the winner for this year's competition. So just a reminder, the winning team gets quality coaching, project management, epic analyst support, prioritization, and high visibility. And best of all is the Shark Tank trophy. So this is the Shark Tank trophy, and their names will be put on the trophy with a plaque on the side. And then they get to keep the trophy for the year until we announce a new winner. So. And again, just a reminder, this year's new award where the audience will get to vote is the People's Choice Award. So the winning project that's picked by the audience will get this trophy, which is a Shark Tank or Shark/Academy Award trophy. And so again, the judges for this year are Dr. Chopra, who's the chair of the Department of Medicine, Dr. Fulbrigge, who's the Senior Associate Dean for the School of Medicine and the Chief Medical Officer for CU Medicine, Dr. Tom McKenzie, who's the Chief Quality Officer for Denver Health. Dr. Connors unfortunately couldn't attend today, but we hope he feels better. And then Dr. Glasheen, who's the Director of the Institute for Healthcare Quality, Safety, and Efficiency, Dr. C.T. Lin, who's the UCH Chief Medical Informatics Officer, and then Dr. Weiler, who's the Chief Quality Officer for UC Health Metro. So we have a esteemed panel of judges that will be asking questions of our projects. And so now we'll go to the first project. The first finalist is a project led by Dr. King, Homeward Bound, Improving System Flow and Patient Satisfaction through Expanded Take-Back Agreements.
Good afternoon, Sharks. Thank you for the opportunity for us to talk about Homeward Bound, our project to improve system flow and patient satisfaction through expanded take-back agreements. Why should we focus on these patients that are transferred from outside hospitals? Unfortunately, there's no standardization nationally to the process of inter-hospital transfer, and without clear guidelines, there tends to be a lot of miscommunication both between patients and providers. So no one has good expectations, and no one really knows what the process is going to look like. So we think that this area is ripe for standardization to serve a patient population that has higher length of stay and higher mortality. Why are we focusing on take-back agreements? Well, let's just take a look at the process for an outside hospital transfer for someone to just get into the hospital with orders. An outside provider identifies that the patient needs to come to our hospital. They call DocLine, who then reaches out to the administrative triage clinician, which is a new role in the UC Health system, as well as the specialist. Once a plan is in place, the patient is transferred, and you can see on the bottom there's a very long process to get the patient up to the floor with orders in. What you will not see on there is the actual procedure or imaging study that the patient was transferred for. So all of this is done without the patient actually receiving the care that they came for, which is not high value. It's not getting the right care to the right patient at the right time. So we would like to move the process to something like this, where an outside provider still calls DocLine, who still gets the ATC and specialist involved. However, once a plan is in place that the patient needs to come to the University of Colorado Hospital, orders can be placed while the patient is getting transferred. As they arrive, they're able to then immediately go to the correct department, get the procedure done. And again, with DocLine, there can be an updated phone conversation with this outside hospital provider, and the patient can be transferred back where they can continue to get care close to home and in a less specialized setting. How does this improve value? Well, it allows us to utilize our highly specialized physicians and departments for the stuff that they trained so long for, and so they can actually be of much greater use to the system and to our patients. We can also improve system flow by decreasing bed use for recovering patients so that patients can recover from procedures closer to home, which allows the patients to have their support system. It would also allow for less complex discharge logistics for patients that are extreme distances away from home. So our goal is to reduce inpatient bed utilization for radiology and gastroenterology procedures by 25% within 12 months. In order to get there, we're going to need help. We're going to need help with data collection and visualization. A lot of this data exists, however, not in a way that we can easily visualize it. So we're going to need help with that. We're also going to need project management help, given that there's multiple departments and multiple stakeholders involved. And of course, project visibility, given that this is a project that's going to involve not only departments at the University of Colorado Hospital, but also our outside hospital partners. So thank you for listening to our presentation. I look forward to answering your questions. Let's get our patients back home and getting care where their support system is, rather than here away from all of that.
Great, thanks, Dr. King, for that presentation. Our first set of questions will come from Dr. Glasheen.
Dr. King, wonderful presentation. Love the idea, and the problem you're trying to solve is real. So a couple of questions. Number one is, do you have a sense of how many patients this would impact?
That's a great question. And it's part of the problem that we have right now is actually the way that the data exists in Epic. It's not tremendously easy to access. And so getting a scope of the entire problem, as you mentioned, I think we all have anecdotal stories about this happening. However, getting actual numbers to it is going to be one of our first steps in this project. And that would be one of the areas that we would love to help in terms of the Epic folks.
But based on, obviously this came to you as a problem, do you have a general sense? Are we talking 0 patients a day, 1 patient, 10, 20, 100? Do you have a rough sense?
Yeah, so this, and again, this is going to be a little bit anecdotal, but I think me and the other administrative triage clinicians, in general, we're taking 1, 2, sometimes 3 of these calls a day from outside facilities. In particular, there seems to be a lot of out-of-state need for imaging, and that's one of the reasons that we want to target the radiology department. Is there's a lot of help that we can provide to our entire catchment area in terms of radiology imaging. Like I say, probably taking 1 to 3 of those calls every time I do a 12-hour shift.
Okay. And the degree of difficulty and logistics on this seems like it could be a potential barrier. Do you have a sense of how often you have enough information to be able to say, yes, that's a necessary, say, radiologic procedure or GI procedure, and that's the right test or the right procedure, versus patients showing up and then you realize, oh, they actually didn't need that test, they needed this test, and we don't have that availability and so forth. So I guess the question is, do you have a sense of which percentage of whatever that number is of patients you can actually identify what the correct need is and then get the patient here for that?
Yeah, I would say it's probably at least 3/4 of the patients. One of the really nice things about that process map that I showed or in the presentation is that there's actually two folks that Doc Klein is talking to, and it's both the administrative triage clinician who brings their own clinical expertise, but then also they're talking to the specialist. So if we're talking about a GI procedure, for instance, they're going to be talking to the gastroenterologist who's going to be making those calls in terms of bringing the patient in for the procedure. And in terms of radiology studies, I have had several conversations where I've actually worked with the sending provider to try to figure out actually what's the appropriate imaging study and whether or not we actually do need to transfer the patient for instance, an MRI or CT scanner that can accommodate a patient that has a higher weight, or if we can do something different, such as an ultrasound that they can usually get more readily. Again, most of the time, those patients are actually correctly identified by the outside providers, and the procedures that they identify are correct. And so we're not changing a ton, but baked into the process already is that conversation with our clinicians and the sending clinician to try and get to the right answer for the patient so that we don't have those misfires of bringing someone here and finding out they need a different procedure.
And Chris, because you answered those questions so quickly, you get a bonus question, which is, what, if any, implications do you think they would have on insurers and payers? This seems like a relatively unique situation where payers are used to paying for transfers of care, but to set up the transport there and back, is that going to be an issue with payers?
It's a good question. And I think that's one thing. To get a true answer, we would have to actually look into that a little bit more. However, I think that you can look at this a little bit more globally if you're the payer, and you can say, okay, where am I going to have my patient? Are they going to be leaving from, for instance, the University of Colorado Hospital to have to go back to Trinidad? And that is, that's going to be a lot of transport, and I'm worried that if they stay away from their support system, then they're going to end up spending more time in a subacute rehab rather than at home, et cetera. So I think that there are other associated costs that this would potentially help save for those payer sources.
Great. Thanks, Dr. King.
Great. Thank you. So our next project is from Dr. Annie Chen, IAMCKD, Improving Anemia Management in Chronic Disease Patients.
Hi, my name is Annie Chen from the Division of Renal Disease and Hypertension. When I tell you about my project, IAMCKD stands for Improving Anemia Management in Chronic Kidney Disease Patients. The prevalence of anemia increases as CKD progresses. It is estimated that 75% of CKD5 patients in the US are anemic. Anemia is associated with increased risk of cardiovascular disease and mortality, and also decreased patients' quality of life. It's estimated about 40% less CKD4/5 patients were receiving treatment for anemia prior to starting dialysis. Now I want you to hear a patient story of mine.
I was an energetic 81-year-old walking a mile a day and driving to activities. In June, I started to lose energy and strength and felt breathless. Gradually, my symptoms became more frequent. I did not have enough energy to leave the house and had difficulty walking to the bathroom. I spent the day lying on the couch and felt like my life was over. After I had 2 injections in December, I gradually got more strength, more energy, and more activities. This was a dramatic change, like a miracle. I'm grateful that I could come back to living and enjoying my life.
So with the ESA injections, my patient's anemia has improved much better, and clinically she feels much better. So the aim for my project, phase 1 is I want to improve the identification of anemia and iron deficiency in our CKD4/5 patient at the renal clinic with routine CBC and iron studies checked every 3 months in at least 90% of these patients. And in phase 2, I want to increase the rate of iron repletion in the patients who are iron deficient from currently 50% to 80%. Also increase the rate of ESA utilization in anemic patients from currently 64% to 80%. So my interventions, one is I want to standardize lab order set for CKD patient that will include CBC and iron study. And then develop anemia management order sets that will include options for ordering labs and medications. This will streamline workflow for the providers. Develop nursing protocols for ESA dosing based on a hemoglobin response, which will allow the nurses to help us manage the patients. Create an automated patient report in Epic that will identify CKD4/5 patients who are anemic and iron deficient. And then also educate our providers on the national guideline to standardize our practice in management of iron deficiency and anemia. What do I need from the sharks is I would need project management, data analysis, Epic technical support, and project visibility, eventually to enhance anemia management in advanced CKD patients. Come on, sharks, let's get our grandma living life again.
Thank you, Dr. Chen. I do have some questions for you. I'm CT Lin. And it seems like this is a grand opportunity to use our technology to try to improve the care, routine care of anemia in chronic kidney disease. I'm curious, what is the data that justifies the frequency of an every 3-month CBC? Where does that come from?
That comes actually from the KDIGO guideline, which is our professional society that you should have lab check at least every 3 months. For people who's anemic and getting ESA, it's actually supposed to be checked once a month.
Okay, so 3 months for those not on therapy and actually 1 month for those on therapy.
Correct.
Okay, and then I'm wondering about screening and treatment interventions and whether it's possible, or have you considered taking the decisions of screening and treatment out of the hands of clinicians and giving them to adjunct clinic members like MAs, RNs, APPs to drive up effective, consistent intervention. And I wonder what your thoughts have been about that.
I think that would be really great, which is actually one of the reasons why I entered this competition, is so that I can get more ancillary support to identify these patients and then help manage these people and take the responsibility sort of away from the clinicians.
And since you've been so succinct at answering my questions, I do have a bonus question for you, which is in the intervention that you're describing, sort of creating and running a report so you can see those patients who are out of compliance with guideline. Have you thought of ways of getting that right into the clinician's workflow or the ancillary staff's workflow right within the EHR in the direct care of patients? Or do you believe this is more of a population approach where you're going to call patients and bring them back in? Let me ask that in 2 separate ways. Sorry. Phase 1 is, how do you anticipate, like, aside from getting a report and saying, let's sit in a committee meeting and decide who's out of compliance, putting it in line with, hey, I'm seeing this patient today, and identifying that this is a patient with an opportunity. How have you thought about that workflow, or what is your envisioning of how this actually makes a change?
I think I'm envisioning, well, first is to identify, so to have the report, and guess will be then reviewed by me, my nurse, and then calling these patients back. So it sounds more like a manual report. I don't know if there's a way to do it in a more high-tech fashion. Of course, if there is, that'd be great.
Yeah, okay, very good. And it sounds like your phase 1 is identification, and then at a later phase, you talk about intervention.
Correct.
In terms of making changes. Very good. All right, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Drs. Chen and Lin. So our third finalist project is a team effort. It is from Dr. Freifeld, Calzia, and Moudgal. And the project is, where is the PFT? Improving pulmonary function testing rates among adults presumed to have asthma in the primary care setting.
Hello, everyone. I'm Megan Calzia, and I am joined by my colleagues, Alana Freifeld, Anita Moudgal, and Dr. Laura Hurley. Our project is called Where is the PFT?
Sharks, today we are seeking increased visibility, help with data analysis, and coaching on EPIC implementation in exchange for improved diagnostic accuracy in asthma, reduced unnecessary inhaler use, and discovery of misdiagnosis. Both national and international guidelines recommend objective testing in patients with asthma, but many patients are diagnosed with asthma and treated accordingly without undergoing testing such as spirometry or pulmonary function tests. There is little literature out there about ambulatory management of asthma, but studies we have found show that up to a third of chart asthma patients did not have evidence of asthma after objective testing, and 2% had serious misdiagnosed cardiac or respiratory illness. So we took a look at our own data within the Denver health system, and as of October of 2020, we found that only 11.7% of patients on the Denver Health Asthma Registry had PFTs since EPIC go live 5 years prior. So we did a root cause analysis with members of the Denver Health Pulmonary Function Testing Lab, and we learned that there's plenty of capacity in the lab. There's no spirometry machines available in adult ambulatory clinics, and we pulled data to find that 85% of patients who had testing ordered for them actually did complete it. So we concluded that the issue is that providers are not ordering tests. Therefore, we surveyed ambulatory care providers, and we found that the majority of them are not ordering tests due to perceived barriers.
Our aim is to improve the rate of pulmonary function tests among Denver Health Asthma Registry patients who have been diagnosed with asthma within the last 5 years from 11.7 to 25% over a period of 6 months. We solicited stakeholder input and determined from a survey administered to providers that the majority of responding providers would prefer an EPIC enhancement, including a health maintenance topic or a best practice advisory, to prompt PFT ordering for appropriate patients. These proposed interventions have been submitted for consideration for the Denver Health EPIC Super PAC, but receiving approval has been a challenge.
Our project will impact around 2,200 patients within the Denver Health Asthma Registry. Patients included in the registry had asthma listed as a problem or visit diagnosis in their chart. Our project will also contribute to high-value care by reducing unnecessary prescription inhaler use and improving the diagnostic accuracy of asthma. The Quad AI established a Choosing Wisely campaign recommending to not diagnose or manage asthma without PFTs, as history and physical exam alone may lead to over or under diagnosis of asthma. Additionally, we can increase appropriate revenue to the Denver Health Hospital system by increasing the number of PFT testing. So join us in taking a bite of fresh air to help move our project forward. Thank you.
Thank you, team. I'm Ann Fulberg, and I'm just going to ask you a couple questions related to this particular project. Thank you for all your thought and thoughtfulness in getting this up. And as a pulmonologist, obviously, I'm always in favor of more objective testing in the diagnosis. But I think a lot of work and thought has gone into this, I think, across the nation. And as you point out, the Quad AI, but other guidelines also have really emphasized the importance of objective testing in the diagnosis of asthma. But as you point out in your data, there is still a low level of objective testing in the diagnosis of asthma in many of our patients. So can you help me think about what you think will be your ability to change the culture and our ability to move this forward, even though there's been a lot of thought and effort on this across the nation so far?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that what happens in ambulatory care settings is you almost never have a patient that is showing up just to discuss asthma. Typically, they're there for diabetes, hypertension, many other things. And unfortunately, asthma, oh, can you hear us? Okay. Unfortunately, asthma tends to fall to the bottom of the tank or bottom of the barrel. And so what we think is, if we had an EPIC intervention, kind of like a cumulative approach, a team-based approach with both the BPA and a healthcare maintenance, we could bring it to the attention of these physicians and make it a priority. Because when we think about something like diabetes, ordering an A1C is prompted in EPIC, but we almost never think twice about remembering to order this objective testing to see how diabetes is. And so we really think that we could change the culture by bringing it to the forefront through an EPIC intervention.
Okay, thank you. And just to clarify, just to make sure we're all on the same page, your number of 11% is the number that you're saying currently is getting testing, not, so of the people who are listed with diagnosis of asthma in the chart, only 11% of them in the primary care setting have objective testing to document the existence of obstructive lung disease.
Correct. Has ever had at least one PFT since Epic go live 5 years prior. At this point, it's been 6 years.
And one of the barriers you talked about, was spirometry and ability to do objective testing in the clinic rather than sending them to a PFT lab. And one of the barriers you said was sending them to that lab. And so can you tell me a little bit more about your thoughts about putting the spirometry into the office setting? Because that also requires training of staff to do the spirometry and also, quality assurance about the ability to actually do the test and do it appropriately. And then as far as reading and who's going to read those tests, just to say, what is the process you think would be actually implemented in the primary care setting to do the objective testing?
So our goal would be to send people to the PFT lab and centralize the testing there. They are worried about standardization of the testing at different sites if they were to do spirometry. And from our discussions with the PFT lab and the pulmonary providers at Denver Health, they actually recommend for adults that they get a full set of PFTs so that other chronic cardiac or pulmonary conditions don't go undiagnosed and get mislabeled.
Okay, and so related to that, because you did mention that one of the big barriers is the distance and getting to the PFT lab. Is there something that you can think of that is going to help move that forward? Because that is one of the barriers you highlighted.
Yeah, so just to clarify, those barriers were perceived provider barriers. And so we had asked providers, what do you think are the barriers? This is what they perceive to be the barriers for patients, but actually what we found is when the tests are ordered for patients, more than 85% are showing up. So maybe this is an intrinsic bias that some of the providers have that are not actually felt by the patients.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. So our fourth finalist is a project from Paul Cannon and Jonathan Treem. It's on remote patient monitoring and electronic patient reported outcomes of oncology patients to reduce preventable acute care utilizations.
Hello, I'm Paul Cannon. I'm presenting for a multidisciplinary physician APP RN collaborative work group on utilizing remote patient monitoring, or RPM, and electronic patient reported outcomes, or ePRO, to reduce preventable acute care utilization for oncology patients. Here in our cancer center and nationwide, patients are living longer with advanced cancers and multiple comorbidities, a testament to the advances in medicine and care delivery. One result, though, is the often increased symptom burdens and acute care needs that these patients have, often labeled time toxicity, which puts them at risk for spending much of their time, often near the end of their life, in acute care settings or facing preventable hospitalizations. One patient, whom I'll call Mark, suffers from chronic pain and complications of metastatic disease. Because of his often uncontrolled pain and other high-risk factors, in about a 2-month period, Mark had 10 ED visits with 8 admissions, despite 8 other primary urgent oncology clinic and palliative care visits. In hindsight, providers and staff and Mark himself asked, is there a better way to decrease the healthcare resources and toll this took on Mark in a safe and effective way? Yet there's a lack of real-time resources to triage and get these patients the needed care at home. We track preventable ED visit and admission data for diagnoses such as uncontrolled pain, nausea, vomiting, and dehydration, and found over 500 preventable ED visits and admissions in the past 12 months. That's why we and other leading organizations across the nation have started to look to and develop RPM and ePRO models to help solve this problem. With the patient at the core, we outfit high-risk patients with advanced cancer with wearable technology that monitors vital signs, activity level, and allows them to input daily symptom assessments with minimal burden to their daily lives and habits. This subjective and objective data is then monitored in collaboration between the virtual health center, primary and urgent oncology clinics, and palliative care clinics based off carefully developed triage and escalation protocols that involve staff, nursing, and provider support to make timely care plan adjustments or escalate any developing problems early. For example, these steps could allow the interdisciplinary team to make safe, quick adjustments to medication when pain or other symptoms are uncontrolled without a clinic or ED visit. We recognize that this is still a novel and developing mode of care delivery. Data produced is vast and needs to be analyzed in an iterative process to validate, identify, and expand access to all current target patients. We therefore request project management and data analyst support to help us in subjective and objective data integration and validation. And we believe computer learning can play an important part in the iterative improvement of current triage models and workflows. With Shark Tank support and resources, we can accelerate the timeline and implementation or the slope of current progress to improve the care and key metrics for those patients with often the most suffering and needs. We believe that this novel mode of care delivery is an integral next step to improving oncology patient care and hope you can support us in this exciting opportunity.
So we'll have Dr. McKenzie ask questions. It's Dr. Treem.
Great. Hi, Dr. Treem. I'm Tom McKenzie. I'm the Chief Quality Officer here at Denver Health. And I love this project. Really nice work. I get the sense that the wave of wearables is upon us, whether we like it or not. I have a number of patients who come in with data from their Apple Watches and Fitbits and Oura Rings, and we got to figure out how we deal with it. So the idea of putting this into a structured project is great. But my first question is whether you already have the wearable devices, and if so, do you have an agreement from the virtual health center to do this monitoring?
Thank you. It's a great question, and thank you to all the Sharks for this opportunity. To answer your question, yes, we're in close contact with the virtual health center. I think that we're still working out the details of exactly what wearable we're actually going to use for this, but I think that the lead candidate looks like it's a watch that can monitor vital signs like heart rate, respiratory rate, SpO2, and probably step count as well. And then we're in development sort of phase with the virtual health center to do patient-reported outcome monitoring via basically an app. So they're fully in support of this project, and I think we're working on our IRB approvals with the industry partners that are going to help us by supplying the device.
Great. My second question is, do you have a sense for how many patients would be willing to try this in sort of your test phase? It seems to me like one of the challenges is going to be separating signal from noise. And I think there's going to be a lot of noise. I can tell you that from my own experience in wearables. There's a lot of noise. And so how do you pick out signal? And do you think you have enough patients who are willing to take this up in your clinic to be able to do that separation between signal and noise?
Really appreciate it, and super incisive question, actually. I think one of the things that we actually are really hoping for out of Shark Tank is specifically the data analyst support, because we agree, we're going to anticipate that especially baseline variations in things like vital signs are going to vary from patient to patient. The sort of patient-reported outcome data that we're going to get on a daily basis, we'll have kind of waves over the course of any given treatment, and what combination of objective and subjective data really best sort of points to the need for an acute intervention is something that actually doesn't really exist. It's one of the primary aims of our project, but the level of data analysis that's going to require, at least in the kind of the pilot study, I think is going to be a good deal more sophisticated than we're probably capable of, and are hoping for the data analysis support. Whether sort of patients will take this up as something that they're willing to try, we're really hopeful. I think the primary sort of intervention will require them to essentially put in a very simple, maybe 3-minute symptom assessment on a daily basis, or every other day, and wear a watch that can be recharged essentially every 48 hours, just like an iWatch, and that's essentially the minimum intervention. So we're hopeful that the feasibility and the sort of uptake will be high. In the kind of prior studies that have looked at this, something like 70 to 80% of patients feel that it's an acceptable intervention without the need to drop out because of kind of the impact on their daily life. So we're hopeful.
Well, that's great. You alluded to this. It feels to me, when I think about data analytics support for a typical quality improvement project, this feels like next level. This is like you might need a PhD student to do their thesis on this, not to sort it out. But great work, and thanks for your responses.
Thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Dr. McKenzie. So our final project is a project from Liz Matthews and Jose Henao-Cordero, and it's focused on vaccination optimization for patients on or starting immunosuppressive therapies.
Hi, Sharks. I'm Liz Matthews from Neurology.
And I'm Jose Henao from Infectious Diseases.
And we're here to talk to you today about vaccines. And no, not just COVID vaccines.
We're here to talk about vaccination in general in one of our most susceptible patient populations, people receiving immunosuppressant medications.
Have you ever wanted to start your patient on immune suppressing therapy, but thought to yourself, how do I make sure this is as safe as possible?
Have you ever wondered what vaccines are recommended for your patient and when to keep them?
Have you ever tried to order vaccines only to find out we don't actually carry them in most of our clinics?
Well, if so, you're not alone. We're a multidisciplinary team of 4 specialties that have been working together with one goal, making vaccination safer and more efficacious for our immunosuppressed patients.
If you're wondering what guidelines exist out there on this matter, there's no shortage of information. In fact, there are so many different guidelines, recommendations, consensus statements that it can be very confusing for clinicians to understand which vaccines their patient should receive.
And you might be wondering, how are we doing vaccinating these patients? And the answer is not great. If you look at the number of people that received rituximab in 2021, only 47% of them got vaccinated against COVID. And when you look at other vaccines, such as the annual influenza vaccine, the numbers are much worse.
And the scope of this project goes well beyond patients on rituximab. We have thousands of patients in the hospital system on immune suppressing therapy. In rheumatology clinic alone, there are 18,000 patients. The vast majority are on immune suppression. Neuroimmunology clinic has another 5,000, and that doesn't even include the patients in transplant, hematology, dermatology, GI. The list goes on and on.
So our primary aim is to improve compliance with recommended vaccinations to at least 80% in patients started or on already immunosuppressive therapies.
And our approach is fourfold. First, to develop standardized guidelines for patients on or starting immune suppressing therapy, and then to disseminate these guidelines to the pertinent divisions. Second is to create an EPIC workflow so that clinicians can readily understand which vaccines their patients should receive and be able to place these orders. Third is to improve access to these vaccines in the very clinics where we're giving the patients immune suppression. And then fourth is to collect and analyze data to understand if our intervention helps to give us information about whether this should be continued long-term.
So step 1 is well underway. We have created our own UCH vaccination guidelines for patients on immunosuppression. And these are based on multidisciplinary societies all across the globe and have been validated by our own infectious disease, pharmacy, neurology, and rheumatology departments.
But these guidelines are somewhat cumbersome, and that's where step 2 comes in. We need your help with EPIC support to design and build an order set to help actually order these medications. We also need your help to collaborate with hospital administration, pharmacy, and whoever else might be necessary to get these vaccines into our clinics. And finally, we need help with data acquisition and analysis to justify expanding or maintaining our intervention.
So what do you say, Sharks? Will you help us vaccinate our patients?
Great, thank you. And we now have Dr. Weiler, who's going to be asking the questions.
Thank you so much for submitting this project and identifying what is a real opportunity for us from a patient safety and quality perspective. My first question for you is, have you thought about using the health maintenance module in writing either an MA or nurse protocol to automatically order and administer these vaccines with physician support and oversight?
So the one caveat and the complicated thing, which is even hard for physicians, it's timing with these vaccination and special indications. As Liz and I have discussed many times, it's kind of thinking ahead, right? Like it comes to the neurologist, for example, being MS, the main disease that we base this off, of which vaccination they're going to select depending on the immunosuppressant that they think that most likely the patient is going to require. So although some of the vaccines you can start like thinking ahead and trying to get them ahead, and that could work for annual things such as influenza, there's some special expertise that the prescribing physician needs to take into account. For set an example, if you think your patient is going to need B-cell depleting agents, then there's a special timing, there's special vaccines you have to select. So that's kind of what we want to, when we're working on the algorithm and creating through an EPIC workflow, that based on your decisions as a physician, that will give you a vaccine or the other.
And my next question to you is, would you support primary care clinics helping with this effort, or do you really see this as a specialty clinic issue, or one where the specialty clinic staff needs to be involved in this process?
So great question. I think yes and no. So it would be great for primary care to have the availability to go through these algorithms, and that's part of it, right? We want to standardize it so any physician can order vaccines for their patients. So would be like the primary care doctor knowing which immunosuppression the patient is getting, which vaccines would be recommended, and having the vaccines available, which they are not all available in all clinics, and that's another reason why we started this project. However, these medications are going to be ordered most likely by a specialist for most situations. So I think it falls in the rheumatologist, oncologist, neurologist who's going to be ordering the medications to make sure that it's as safe as possible for its patient.
And I'll add to that we currently in neuroimmunology clinic, for example, we often will tell patients, we think you need the shingles vaccine. We don't carry it. Go to your primary care doctor. They wait for an appointment for a month. They go there to get it. There leads to a lot of delays. So I think part of the goal of this is to be able to say, like we do with the influenza vaccine, you need these vaccines as quickly as possible before you're starting therapy or timed around your therapy. We're going to give it to you right now in 5 minutes. So I think that's a major goal, is streamlining that process.
And do you have any sense of what the total opportunity is in terms of patients? You gave some statistics very specific to, the neurology patient population with regards to immunosuppressives, but obviously there's patients throughout our clinics that are immunosuppressed. Any sense of total opportunity that exists?
I think it's thousands of patients. I mean, I know in rheumatology, like we said, there are 18,000 patients. Probably all of them at one point would be eligible. In neuroimmunology, 5,000. So I think extrapolating on that, we're talking, tens of thousands of patients who probably are not currently getting the most optimal care.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. All right, audience members, now's your chance to have your voice heard and vote. So again, just a reminder, these are the 5 projects. You'll have 30 seconds to vote. And this vote will help the judges in their deliberations, as well as, again, the winner will get the People's Choice Award trophy. So if you could please vote. Great. So the winner of the People's Choice Award is the PFT project. So congratulations to the team. And then at this time, the judges will move to a different link and will deliberate.
All right, and now as the judges go to make their decisions, we will hear from the winner of last year, Lorna Allen from Infectious Disease, on standardizing the OPAT discharge process, improving transitions in care.
Hi, I'm Lorna Allen. I work with the Infectious Disease Group here at University Hospital, and I'm excited to be sharing my project today, which looks at standardizing the OPAT discharge process using a QI approach. So first of all, what is OPAT? OPAT stands for Outpatient Parenteral Antimicrobial Therapy. It's essentially a safety net program here at the hospital where we follow all patients who discharge on IV antibiotics to the ambulatory setting. Goals include facilitating safe transitions of care, monitoring for adverse drug effects, and identifying signs of toxicity early on. Benefits of OPAT are well documented and include shorter lengths of stay, improved patient satisfaction, and reduced costs to the healthcare system. We face many challenges on OPAT, including lack of a standardized discharge process, which currently requires input from multiple teams, as well as communication with many outpatient facilities. This lack of standardization can lead to missed doses at discharge, wrong doses of drug being given, near-miss events, and patient harm. The Anschutz program was established in 1997 and is certainly one of the largest in the region. As you can see here, the numbers of patients in the program doubled over about 5 years, and currently we follow about 1,000 patients a year on our program. So because this project focuses heavily on medication reconciliation, I wanted to provide some national context for the toll that med errors take on our healthcare system. In 2011, the Network for Excellence in Health Innovation, which is a national health policy institute, published a report that estimated $21 billion is spent annually on preventable medication errors. This really highlighted that patients are vulnerable at transitions of care, with 66% of errors occurring during transitions and 12% of errors occurring during discharge. It's estimated that inpatient medication errors cost upwards of $16 billion a year, and outpatient errors costing $4 billion a year. Recommendations from this institute were to leverage technology and improve interdisciplinary teamwork. So how does this play out in our institution here locally? I'd like to provide a patient example. So this patient was meant to be discharged on vancomycin 750 milligrams IV once a day. These were the orders written by the ID team. The primary team transcribed these orders onto the DC med list as 750 milligrams every 8 hours. This resulted in the patient receiving 3 times the intended dose of vancomycin. This patient was ultimately readmitted to our hospital with an acute kidney injury and was admitted for about 11 days. So in collecting and reviewing baseline data for our program, it's become clear that errors like this are unfortunately not uncommon. You can see here that 46% of the time OPAT orders are missing on the AVS, and 48% of the time the drug is either missing or wrong on the DC med list. Here's a graphic visualization of that data, and I wanted to call your attention to the discharge location type. So about 30% of the time, our patients are being sent to facilities such as skilled nursing homes, rehabs, or long-term care facilities. It's especially important for these vulnerable patients that our orders and our AVS are accurate, as that's what these facilities rely heavily upon to provide care for our patients. Here's a process map that looks at the current state. I know it's a busy slide and I don't expect people to follow all of this, but I want to point out a couple of things. In the current state, we require coordination from multiple disciplines in both the inpatient and outpatient setting. And root cause analysis shows that the current workflow has multiple steps that are prone to error, as illustrated by the arrows here. Currently, the ID team places an OPAT note, which is then transcribed as an order onto the DC med list by the primary team. The ID team has to place 2 OPAT notes, one in the inpatient view of EPIC, and then one in the ambulatory view that is routable to the outpatient pools. In addition, orders, the OPAT orders are cut and pasted onto the AVS, sometimes by case management and sometimes by the primary teams, but keep in mind that about 50% of the time they're not pasted on at all. Hopefully you can see here that this workflow is redundant and inefficient and can have a lot of room for improvement. The aims of our project are to increase accuracy of IV antibiotics on the DC med list from 52 to 90% in a year, and then increase the frequency of OPAT orders on the AVS from 54 to 90% in 1 year. Our interventions are twofold. So One is a change to the workflow in which ID providers will now own the drug on the med list and will be responsible for entering the IV antibiotic there. We've also leveraged Epic to create an OPAT navigator. So this navigator creates a standardized OPAT note that will automatically pull onto the ABS. Here's a visualization of the current state in which many primary teams are now responsible for placing these orders on the DC med list. In future state, ID providers will do this themselves. And here's a video of that OPAT navigator that we've created. You can see here in the play environment that we have discrete flow sheet rows that will be filled out by the ID provider, things like central line access, what types of labs are required weekly. And from filling out this structured data entry, a standardized OPAT note is then created. This serves as a single live document that can be updated as recommendations changed, and certainly easily referenced by all the teams involved. The templated OPAT note will also be routable to the ambulatory pools, eliminating the need for that second note to be placed by the ID team. Here you see on the after visit summary, the IV antibiotic is listed correctly as verified by ID with the correct dose and frequency, and those OPAT orders are automatically pulled onto the AVS directly below the DC med list. Here's a process map of the future state. You can see we've eliminated all cut and paste by automating those orders onto the AVS. It removes the need for 2 notes to be placed by infectious disease and guarantees accurate orders on the med list. This eliminates 4 steps from the current workflow, improves efficiency, and reduces redundancy. We're excited to say that the go live for this intervention is anticipated for June 2022, so just in the coming months. And the project is a finalist for the CEPS grant application, so we're certainly hoping to receive additional support through funding to really promote success in this realm. We plan to have an automated data pull with support from our Epic analyst team for at least 2 years after implementation of this intervention. And in addition to tracking the primary aims, we'll also be looking at 30-day all-cause readmission rates. Here's just a brief timeline that highlights some of the major accomplishments over the last year, mainly looking at the governing body committees that were required to present to for approval prior to moving the project along. And certainly I'll point out that Omicron and Delta variants of COVID sprung up during this time, so I was really pleased that we were able to still move the project along as far as we could during that time. This is a slide just showing how the project hits all the major tenets of high value care, which looks at balancing clinical benefit with costs and harms, and with the goal of improving patient outcomes. We really tried to focus on each of these individually, and I think the project has achieved success in all of these realms. None of this would have been accomplished without an amazing team of mentors. And so I just want to say a big thank you to everyone listed here. None of this would have been done without you. Thank you so much, and I look forward to any questions.
Thank you, Lorna. That was fabulous. For everyone that doesn't know me, my name is Tyler Anstead. I serve as one of the Associate Vice Chairs for Quality. I'll be serving as MC while our sharks are out deliberating. We've got Lorna Allen here, who's happy to answer questions, so feel free to throw those in the Q&A if you have any. Lorna, I'll get things kicked off here and ask you a question of, as a primary team provider, as a hospitalist that works in the hospital, how does this affect me?
That's a great question. So one of the areas we really focused on was clinician satisfaction when going into this project. I think there's anecdotally a global sense that OPAT is a cumbersome process for everybody involved. Pretty much all 6 of those teams that are listed in that process map that is the current workflow. So we're trying to focus heavily on improving clinician satisfaction with this workflow, both for ID and for the primary teams. You may have noticed in the future state process map, we pretty much alleviated the primary team of all steps in the OPAT process, aside from placing the initial consult, and then of course being involved in plans for discharge. But really they will no longer be required to place any of the IV antibiotic orders or transcribe any of those orders any longer. So hoping that that relieves some of the stress around these OPAT discharges for the primary teams, and also just streamlines the workflow, makes it more efficient.
So you're saying less work for me and hopefully better outcomes for our patients.
Right, that's the goal.
Sign me up. What's the biggest thing that you've learned from going through this work over the last year as being the Shark Tank winner? Yeah,
I mean, I've learned a lot. It's been a year marked by, a lot of humbling events going through the project, and then also a lot of great strides and excitement about the project. So I would just say the biggest thing I realized is sort of, you don't know what you don't know. You can think that an intervention seems really reasonable to you in your own mind, but then realizing the process that you have to go through to really push that intervention forward, the committees and governing bodies that also need to approve what you think of as a feasible idea and things is important. So that's where I've just been so grateful to my team of mentors who have helped me throughout the past year really navigate all the systems to get this project to the finish line, and so excited to launch it hopefully next month.
Great. If there are any questions from the audience, feel free to throw those into the Q&A. One other question that I have for you while we're waiting for the sharks to come back. How will this affect case management workflow processes? Because as we all know, they are really critical in getting patients set up with outpatient antibiotics. What does this do to their workflow? Yeah, so it won't change their day-to-day workflow of securing a home infusion company and a home health company. But what it will do is it will automatically pull the information of where the patient is set up into that OPAT order, and then that will automatically pull onto the ABS. So we have tried to automate as much of the process as possible, and we have met with case management, and they are also working on automating parts of their day-to-day workflow. So I think everybody's really hopeful that this can become, again, more efficient, less redundant, and less reliant on sort of humans to cut and paste and put the information where it needs to be in Epic, as opposed to just automatically pulling in because that information's already entered. So certainly collaborating with case management's been really important and will be an ongoing part of the project. Great. And we have one further question from Denver Health, and that is, any plans for spread if successful, including to Denver Health? Yeah, so we have been in initial talks with the infectious disease group at UC Health Loveland in the north, and plan to meet with them again. So we're just demoing the process for them, and then they could choose if they want to elect that or not. And we have discussed with Denver Health a bit what we're doing here, and would be thrilled if they wanted to adopt a similar model, which would make it easier for our fellows and other providers that transport in between the facilities. So that would be a goal, yes. Great. Thank you so much, Lorna. This is fabulous work, and we look forward to seeing this go live. Looks like we've got our sharks back in the tank, and so I will hand it back off to Dr. Chopra, lead shark.
Alpha shark. As a reminder, the Sharks had a very intense discussion, and it was a very, very close vote. And as a reminder, the winning project receives coaching on their ideas. They receive help with project management. They receive Epic analyst support, and they get prioritization and high visibility of their work. And we had a very robust debate about which project we thought was the best. And if we go to the next slide. I am happy to announce that the winner of the project is, boom, 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 Vaccination Optimization for Patients on or Starting Immunosuppressive Therapies by Dr. Liz Matthews and Dr. Jose Henao-Cordero. Congratulations to Drs. Matthews and Cordero. We wish you all the best and look forward to supporting you with this work. I'll turn it over to Dr. Ho now. Would you like to say a few words, Dr. Matthews and Dr. Henao?
Sure. I just want to say thank you to everyone. We're very excited about this project, which I think is very important. And also want to thank Elena Weinstein and John Corboy from Rheumatology and Neurology, who have been very helpful in getting this project this far along.
Jose, any words from you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited about this project. I want to thank Liz for inviting me on board and the rest of my ID colleagues for collaborating with creating the guideline. And thank you, Sharks.
I want to thank all of our finalists and judges for their hard work and efforts today. Keep improving high value care. We'll see you next year and look forward to hearing from Dr. Matthews and Henao on their project next year at the same time. Have a good day, everybody. Bye-bye.